hour, and then
No
what?
worries, man. It would have been embarrassing for us to be talking for a whole hour about dropping knowledge bombs and then,
Amateur. Amateurish.
That was some schoolboy error, man. I'm sorry. But yeah, as I was saying, you know how, celebrities are often kind of worshipped, in my opinion, maybe a little bit too much. But is it their responsibility to act virtuously, to kind of be a role model, if you will, to the common folk? Or, you know, should they just live their lives with this baggage or burden on their shoulders? So yeah, I just want to put it to you guys. What do you think about that?
Right, well, who wants to go first?
You got nothing?
Well, I've got something. I think we place too much emphasis on the celebrity figures or figures in positions of power. And, you know, I think in an idealized scenario, we can't really choose who is going to be a role model for a particular person. It may not necessarily be a child, it could be an adult. We don't really know where those role models will come from and in what context. And we almost idealize a positive role model experience. We almost kind of mythologize that, you know, because you are good looking, because you are successful, that you are also a morally righteous person, that you're also someone whose example should be followed. And not just that, but also that your life then becomes a total example. And we have a habit of then ignoring maybe sometimes some of the ugly elements of someone's existence, someone's life, in favor of creating a simplified version of them being a good person, them being a pillar to follow. And so when invariably that person fails to live up to that simplified ideological example that we've created, it's very unfair. But what society then does is criticize them. And if we take a step back from that, should they be role models? No, but they can't help it because they're in the public eye and they become the object of people's desires, you know, whether rightly or wrongly. I think the parents and the friends of people, the partners of people, also have a massive responsibility to take that on. I think it's quite interesting that a lot of people.
Sorry.
What am I funny? Am I a comedian or something?
No. Do you know, it's not even you. It's not you, man. It's not you. I just said, you know, when you sometimes have like this weird kind of image playing in your head. Anyway, sorry, that's a complete deviation. Sorry.
No, it's cool. But basically, yeah, I mean, the people in our lives also have a responsibility to impact and influence our lives as well. We can't just sort of outsource all of that to celebrities and politicians and film stars and footballers. What about the people in our lives who we all have a responsibility to each other to positively influence each other in some kind of way? You know, we need to be held accountable for that.
Here's the thing, though. I think if we want to be realistic, okay, all right. So when you're a kid and you're going to, I don't know, primary school, the people that you tend to look up to are the people in your household. But obviously, as your knowledge of the world of popular culture expands, sometimes, you know, the ones that care for you the most, the ones that should be the role models that you look up to, you sort of abandon. And it's almost as if you're looking for someone out there in the world to reflect that which you consider to be good. And sometimes it might not be something you actively desire, but it might be something, I don't know, something that you sort of desire unconsciously. So it's not that I'm I don't know, a teenager and I'm thinking I want Lil Durk to be my role model. Do you know what I mean? I really want Lady Gaga to represent my perspective. No, I don't think you think of it like that. But we know that teenagers have pinups. Who didn't have a pinup? Whether it be Bob Marley or Tupac or Beyonce, people have pinups, and because of that, just the fact that they're admired for their prowess, their artistic prowess, and their ability. I personally think that sometimes it's the celebrities that believe that they have to sort of perform, or they have to touch upon certain speaking points that may be sort of politically relevant. So, okay, what's his name? The guy who was in that film where he wrestled a bear. Leonardo DiCaprio.
Wrestled a bear.
I believe he was attacked by a bear.
It wasn't. It's not like he performed a suplex. It was more like.
You said wrestle a bear. I thought you were going to start talking about Khabib or Zangief.
No, but obviously he got mauled by a bear. He got attacked by a bear.
All the way from Russia, the 5,000-pound grizzly bear.
Yes, very good.
Leo.
But the point is, when Leo came on the stage during the Academy, was it the Academy Awards or was it the Oscars?
The Oscar Academy Awards.
They're the same thing.
They're the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
wow,
they're the
same thing. The Academy Awards / Oscars. When he came on the stage, he started sort of waxing lyrical about climate change.
Yeah.
I mean, hey man, that was great acting, but hey, I mean, if I want to know about climate change, I don't know if I'm going to go to the feet of Leonardo DiCaprio.
Well, technically, he didn't cook that fish that he ate, so he was saving the environment.
But to be fair, surely one could argue.
What did that guy say again, Hardy?
I did what I had to do.
Yep, I did what I had to do.
But this is the thing, though. Surely, if you are on a platform like that, is it such a bad thing to kind of, have people spread the awareness of whatever you're trying to push? I hear what you're saying. Ultimately, it's an award ceremony. Get your award and get the hell on. But there's so many
prestige.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Thanks. There's so many eyes on you. I can understand how great the temptation would be. And I'm sure it's one of those things where, if people know you're that kind of the activist, if you will, and you don't say anything, there'll be some sort of backlash. Probably going back to what you said with this pressure to kind of, you're still performing to some degree, if that makes any sense.
But do you think, because it's interesting, when someone like Leonardo DiCaprio makes a comment like that, he wants to be a role model
he's going out of his way. He's going out of his way to support
climate change. Similarly, when Lewis Hamilton made a comment about carbon footprints, the irony being he burns fossil fuels at an excessive rate for a living.
Yeah, exactly.
Or even when it was Harry and Meghan who made a comment about climate change and they were told, well, get off your private jet. Is there a thing there where you can only take that moral high ground if you don't ask for it? As in, is the moral high ground something we imbue on people, and is it something that we resent when people offer it, when people put it forward? I
think so, because there's how is no one likes to feel like they're being judged, and it's very hypocritical. If you're on one hand, you're saying climate change and you're burning fossil fuels every weekend, or, when you're driving your F1. So it's, And the thing is, now you're being held accountable because you've said it in such a large stage. So if you were to go, actually, I didn't say that. There's so many articles that can prove otherwise. So you screwed yourself.
I didn't say
it's interesting.
I tweeted it. I didn't say it.
But that's a real interesting point, though, that I think Hamza made, because what he would say, basically, I think what you were sort of pointing to, even sort of alluding to, is that if you make a statement publicly, you give yourself license to be judged publicly.
Yeah.
If you do anything in the public eye, so if, for example, you have a reality TV show about, your family, let's call it, I don't know, let's say if it was me, Mike's house, yeah?
Whose house?
Mike's house. So and then essentially, if I say something which is a little bit controversial, hey man, I've made my bed, because I'm out there in the public eye. So obviously, I should be also judged publicly. It's kind of funny, because I was thinking this kind of slightly links in a weird way to the Bible, because there was a scripture where King David, essentially, he was sort of looking out his window, saw this kind of nice girl that he liked, who happened to be someone else's wife.
Yeah.
And then he basically sent the husband of that woman to the front of the battle to die, so that he could essentially make his move. What was interesting anyway, what transpired, so obviously he slept with her. What transpired is that exactly, man. What transpired is that a prophet comes to his palace or whatever, and tells him basically a story about how, there's this farmer who has all these sheep, and and there's this farmer who's a lot poorer, struggling to make ends meet, and he's just got one sheep that he's trying to rear. And then David basically gets angry. He says, "Who on earth is doing this?" Because obviously the one with the many sheep was trying to take the single sheep from the poorer farmer. And then David obviously gets angry and frustrated, and he's like, okay, who's doing this? Essentially, he's like, okay, let's go down to their house now. Let's see what we can do to these guys.
Arms out, innit?
Arms out, yeah. So essentially, the guy goes, well, it's you, man. You were the one. So obviously, but what's interesting about that is that he did that, and it was very public. But his, I suppose you could say, comeuppance was also public. His kind of punishment, because he was a king, so his punishment was also public. And I think that's a very good point.
That's almost like celebrity culture, because everything is out in the public. But actually, I'm happy that you brought that up. That kind of goes into something I was thinking about. Even in comics, and kind of films and stuff, with this kind of, I suppose, not the dark hero, what's the anti-hero, if you will. Kind of the ideas of being virtuous change a little bit here. Ultimately, they're a good guy, right? But they do whatever they have to do to see that the job is done. If you know what I'm trying to say, whether it's for selfish reasons or stuff, I guess maybe the fallout is that people are saved. They might not necessarily strive to do it. Mad Max is a good case. For example, he goes through a town. People happen to be saved, no matter what he does anyway. But that was not exactly what he's striving to do.
Or that critically acclaimed film, I believe it's Megamind. I believe.
That was the animated movie, right?
Yeah.
But my point is this: do you
randomly
think
I saw a clip of that yesterday? I don't know why. I randomly saw a clip of Megamind where he's trying to intimidate a woman in a chair, and it's not working.
Yeah.
I don't know how.
I still haven't watched it.
And interestingly enough, okay, no, I was gonna say that was played by Leonardo DiCaprio, but it's actually not. It's
Megamind.
Yeah, I think it was Brad Pitt.
Megamind was Leonardo DiCaprio.
No, that's what I said. I thought it was, but I think it was actually Brad Pitt.
I thought it was Will Ferrell.
No.
It sounded like Will Ferrell to me.
Hey man, check it out.
That is not Brad Pitt.
If it was Leonardo DiCaprio, I would have said this guy's been grinding for that Oscar too hard.
Just taking any job. No, but yeah, the point was trying to make is: do you think, to some extent, though, granted there are people that I think are too harsh on when a celebrity, the downfall of a celebrity. But I think in the last couple of years, to some extent, people just realize, hey, look, they are human after all, right? So it's just one of those things. I think Mike and I spoke about this a few weeks ago, actually. You know, there's a lot of people that don't give a person a time to grow. You can have an opinion one day, right? Or opinion a couple of years ago, and a couple of years later, you have changed completely as a person.
Yeah.
And now people just want to shoot you down for the first mistake you make. Case in point, remember that girl that was meant to be the new Black Panther, as they were touting her to be?
Yes.
I forgot her name. She made the comment about
really
the anti-vaccine
Oh,
thing.
Letitia Wright.
Yeah.
She was considered to be an anti-vaxxer.
Yeah. And then
Letitia Wright,
a couple of weeks prior, she was on every news tabloid outlet thing for, she's going to be the next Black Panther. Praise. She says one thing, literally night and day. Now I was reading some of the tweets, man. People were saying die, you know, and all this kind of crazy. It's like, whoa, chill. Was it the smartest thing to say? Probably not, right? But should she be crucified for what she says? No, I genuinely don't think so. And
No, but I think this is the issue. So sometimes when, you know, for example, someone like Leonardo DiCaprio comes on stage and sort of gives this sort of diatribe, that doesn't necessarily mean that he's not entitled to his own opinion.
He is.
He's entitled to his own opinion. Yeah. I think there's a couple things that people might be a little bit irked about. The first thing is that, okay, you're doing this on my time. You know, I'm watching this, but you're actually, you know, I suppose you could say expressing your political
and I'm not trying to hear that
opinion on my time. This is my sort of my downtime. You know, when I'm watching the Oscars, I'm not expecting to be lectured to. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing, though, is that a lot of these issues that these celebrities may speak about and is that they are divisive issues where there are two sides of the argument and very strong and staunch believers on both sides. So because of that, if you then say, okay, this is what I believe about climate change, you automatically alienate half of the people of a nation.
Yeah. This is true.
Which creates, which in a sense moves, I suppose, artistry and film and popular culture into politics.
Yeah, drags it in, kicking and screaming. Yeah.
I mean, I have heard that culture is downstream from politics, but I don't think people want politics and popular culture to be bedfellows.
But the thing is, can you separate the two? Can you separate the two without seeming like you're pandering or you're toothless, basically? If you know what I'm trying to say.
Well, are you talking about the actual dragon in how do you say that?
Yeah, I was talking about that black dragon. But sorry to cut you short, because there's some people out there who there's some games that have like some sort of political agenda or something like this, right? Or some films and stuff. And then when you speak to the filmmaker or the developer of the game, this has happened quite recently, they kind of underplay some of the very obvious political tones they were trying to put aside, put into the project or whatever. So it's kind of like, well, if you're going to bring it up, then you can't then now chicken out. If you know what I'm trying to say, then why bring it up? So this is why I think a lot of people are upset, because they feel like there's no teeth. There's nothing dangerous or thought-provoking about what they're trying to do.
You say that, but if we look at what's her name? You know, Mandalorian star who got
Gina Carano.
Gina Carano. If we look at Gina Carano now, though, Disney have taken a stance. Because remember, normally I would say Disney are quite.
I'll give you that.
Are quite sort of in the middle. You know, they're quite milquetoast, if you know what I mean, in that sense. But in this situation, they have taken a stance.
To be fair, though, she was doing this for months. I don't know if you follow the story. She was tweeting some crazy stuff for a couple of months. And it's kind of one of those things, because a lot of people, I get it, they were upset that she got fired. But James Gunn was fired off the bat. Remember?
Yes, but James Gunn. Okay, don't get me wrong. What James Gunn did. Okay, we could argue in hindsight it was a joke. But that was a pedophilic joke.
Yeah, that was a very.
That's not something you can get away with.
Yeah.
No takebacks.
No, you have this. That's the thing.
Which is interesting, actually. Which actually brings us like a nice segue into this kind of next kind of thought I wanted to bring in. This idea of the Overton window. Yeah. So like, what's interesting about James Gunn? The reason why that doesn't wash is because of the fact that it comes outside of the Overton window. So basically, the Overton window is kind of coined by this guy, Joseph Overton. And it's kind of like, I would say, a sort of political diagram, let's say a political diagram. So essentially, anything that falls within the Overton window is culturally widely accepted. Basically, there's a general consensus about what is morally good, and what will happen is politicians will then look at what is morally accepted, morally good, what the general consensus is, and they will take their sort of policies or create policies around those points. Yeah. Now, obviously, if you stand outside or if your views come outside of the Overton window, what it means is that you are going against the grain when it comes to the general consensus and what people believe to be correct and what people believe to be right. James Gunn, right about now, I pray that the Overton window never swings that far. But the point is that joke, as much as it was a joke, it may have been a joke. Because similarly, Trump said that joke, the whole kind of, what was it? I'm not going to say it, yeah. But obviously he was talking to someone, they were recording him, and it was this kind of, this changing room kind of humor.
Yeah.
Locker room talk.
Lads talk.
Yeah, locker room talk, lads talk. And we know it. I'm not going to say it. But the fact of the matter is, it's the same situation. Gunn basically said something which is outside of the Overton window, okay? I don't know how far it's going to swing. I don't know if 5 years' time we're going to be, saying, polyamorous relationships are good. As a society. We might not be saying it individually, but as a society. But what James Gunn said, the reason why he was pulled up on that and obviously later lost his job was because actually, even if it's a joke, that comes far outside of what is widely accepted.
It's like too crazy. What were you going to say, man?
No, I mean, I agree. I think when you have things like that, the Overton window, I imagine the bell curve, the sociological bell curve, and you've got your block in the middle, which represents the broad span of people, and then you've got your extremes at either end. But I think going back to a few points about arts, government, politics, and culture, they are interlinked and they are bedfellows. To use an example, which film is this? It was that rubbish film. I didn't watch it, but I understand this is what happened. The one that's not Suicide Squad, Harley Quinn and her friends.
Oh,
it's got
yeah.
Ewan McGregor. Yeah, it's got Ewan McGregor.
That film is actually trash, man.
Wait, what film is this?
Harley, the emancipation of Harley Quinn and the Birds of Prey, something like this.
Oh,
right?
okay, the Birds of Prey. Yeah.
Now, I've not seen the film, but apparently Ewan McGregor is in it, and he delivers a really good performance.
He's actually the best thing. Him and the guy that plays Victor Zsasz.
So, as I understood it, the two characters, the two villains of the show, the film, were supposed to be lovers. So two men who were lovers, so a homosexual couple.
It's implied. It's not.
Yeah,
it's not explicitly said.
But this is what I'm trying to say.
Implied.
But what occurred was that the plan was for it to be more explicitly displayed, but there were concerns about how that would be perceived in certain geographic regions. That they are intending to cater towards, right? And that's obviously just a recent example where the politics, the underlying geopolitics, is affecting the artistic creation, arguably. And it's serving what the content creators are determining to be the perceived Overton window of that market, right? Going back towards that market share, trying to target it. And it changes, so what people find acceptable changes. And there is some people, or there is a group of people, and their job basically is to poll people and find out, whether or not,
what's cracking.
are you comfortable? Would you be okay? They'll do test screenings. They'll do all these kind of things to tailor the content towards whatever it is that we deem to be morally acceptable. And sometimes they get it wrong. A lot of the times they get it right, which is why we're comfortable going in and watching these films over and over again. But then we get offended not offended, but it riles us when the same people in those films then try and, I don't know, tell us how to comport ourselves in our private lives.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's funny because, I don't know, man. I just feel like, but you raised a really interesting point, because you said that, based, obviously, using the example of the Overton window, morality shifts. There's a shifting.
Region, time.
Exactly. Yeah. It was perceived one way at a particular time. Obviously, today is perceived another way. Tomorrow will be perceived another way. And that just makes me think to myself, well, in a sense, who are we to judge? Because it shows you that actually nobody really holds that sort of moral authority. Yeah. So even when you have a whole swath of people, trying to crucify someone, it's almost like we forget when we get into, the madness of crowds, we forget that actually we ourselves, we've got stuff in our closet that needs to be dealt with as well.
You bring up a really good point, because this is, I remember when we had this conversation, we had the call, I think it was a couple of days ago. We're just talking about morality and stuff. It's one of those things, again, look, I'm not trying to say I'm some kind of benevolent soul and stuff like this. I'll have someone go, Hamza, man, you're
a magnanimous character.
Yeah, they'll just give me a character. They'll give me a character review. Hamza, you're a really good guy and stuff. And genuinely, I say to them, actually, I don't really think I am, but thank you. And that's not me trying to be modest.
Humble brag.
Genuinely, because I'm not. There's lots of things I'm ashamed of. There's probably mistakes I'm gonna make. I keep on learning and stuff. Like, I'm striving to become a better person. But hey, man, I'm really not, man. Honestly. And this is the thing. It's one of those things where I was thinking, why then do I strive to be? Maybe I'm overthinking. Why then do I strive to be a moral person? Is it because I just want to sleep well at night? If you know what I'm trying to say. To know that I didn't screw someone over or I didn't hurt somebody and stuff like this. But even if it is for selfish reasons, at least I'm affecting people around me in a better way, if that makes any sense.
I wonder if I'm misinterpreting you though, Hamza, because are you saying then that morality is kind of a construct? That you're just...
But I think to some extent, maybe it is. I mean, like you just said, right? It changes. If time and regions can change it, then what makes it tangible? What makes it a constant thing, if that makes any sense? If those things can have effects on them. I genuinely think, for me anyway, the thing that keeps me in line is how my behavior affects other people. If it's a negative feedback I get, then it's clearly not a good thing I did. If you know what I'm trying to say.
But then though, Hamza, but this brings us back to that's your subjective perspective and opinion on, I don't know, on morality. Because there is someone somewhere that actually will not feel the same way you feel.
No, completely. That's why
about how they treat the people around them.
Exactly.
Don't forget, there are cultures that eat people. Have eaten people in the past, i.e. the Caribs. There are cultures
that take very young wives.
That believe in that believe in polygamy. There are cultures that believe in polyamorous relationships. So,
what standards am I then judging morality by? But this is the thing. I think if you place those rules upon yourself, I guess, and try to live by them, but then someone else, just as you said, someone could look at me and go, I don't think you're living very morally.
But don't you think that sorry to cut you off there.
Yeah, no,
but don't you think that is the fundamental root cause of the issue, which is, as, let's say, in general, people become more, the world becomes more individualistic, right? The global economy caters towards our individualism, and the more we refine our individual tastes, preferences, likes, dislikes, the more we refine our own individual moral compass. And because it is so easy for one person to raise their voice loudly in this day and age, whether it's let's say it's a footballer, to change the example, a footballer who's seen in a nightclub, and it's COVID. We have COVID restrictions, and this footballer is seen in a nightclub with no mask and not socially distanced and all that type of stuff. Right, forgetting all the repercussions they would get professionally, right? I then take offense to that because I find that personally abhorrent to my moral compass, hypothetically. And I go onto a social media platform, I at this guy, and I at a whole bunch of other people, and I go after him because it contradicts my moral compass in this particular scenario. Doesn't that? I think that's a fundamental thing there, which is, who are these people being held accountable to? Who's, like Mike is saying, whose morality are we comparing?
Yeah.
Who are we? We can't please everybody.
But this is the thing. Sorry, Mike. Mike.
All I was saying, because the reality is, because I remember, I think I was speaking to Hamza the other day, and I was just giving him an example. Now, disclaimer. Yeah. Okay.
Big warning.
Get energy, eh?
The thoughts and opinions of Michael Campbell.
This is an analogy, or you could perceive it to be an allegory, but not to be, whatever. The point is, not to be taken literally. So I personally think, anyway, that in a sense we're all kind of like pigs.
Yes, I remember this. Yeah, pigs
in the mud, man. Like from Animal Farm. Well, and the way I see it is.
Animal Farm, yeah.
4 legs good, 2 legs bad.
Hey man, George Orwell. But honestly though, I feel like we are, and what I mean by that is, if you kind of see like mud and the sty as the sort of human condition, and the fact that pigs, the way that their sort of structure is, they're always facing down. And if you think about it, we're all in the mud, man. Like, we all have our own issues to deal with. We all need help when it comes to this, our moral compasses, or when it comes to being good, whatever that means, people. And I feel like I feel like what's great about it, but also quite sad or sort of sad about it, is that we're all together. We are a community, but at the same time we all kind of are within this human condition where we are fallible and where we fail, and when we struggle with foibles and vices. And the only sort of chance we have, I think, of sort of that sense of redemption is if we look in the reflection of the mud and maybe see the midnight sky.
Reflecting off the mud, yeah? No. But
shiny mud, man.
As I
in mud.
But I say that as a joke or whatever. But I say that as an analogy, let's say, or an allegory, in terms of seeing the sort of stars reflected in the mud or whatever, as what I believe is the human condition and humanity in their relationship with a higher power.
Yeah, because you never truly see the full picture from your point of view, your perspective. But yeah, you have a point. And just to slightly go off on what you were saying here as well, sometimes I wonder then, what is a truly moral and immoral act? Because, okay, on one hand, right, I think most people say murder that's immoral, period. But then you go into, okay, well, if you have to defend yourself, 1, 2, for food. Because you can say, right, going again about how different religions, different people view morals. A Buddhist would say the fact that you're eating meat, hey man, that's haram. Yes, although that's a different religion.
That's some mad religious
Religious
syncretism.
crossover.
Just sort of mixing and matching everything together.
Was
And it's an Islamic
Was this-
Buddhist monk.
Yeah,
the Buddha wearing a turban as well, Hamza?
yes. Well, you know what I'm saying? They'll say that's the worst thing you can do.
A Buddhist monk genuflecting, isn't it?
Tasbih and everything.
Like, going to my point, like this is where things become kind of great, because you can they have a point. I mean, you're taking a life. I'm not dissing anyone that is I eat meat and stuff like that, but a vegan can generally say, hey man, you are claiming to be virtuous here, and then you do this, and in the same token, a person that's vegan, that's giving you this speech about eating and killing, you see them and then they're doing some mad stuff.
Yeah.
And you're like, hey man, you can't really judge me. Like,
Yeah.
what's going on? Like, where does
thing
that
is,
line
though,
end for you in
the
terms
only
of?
thing is, I would say, is that there is I believe anyway, and as obviously there's some people from some, I don't know, some sort of animal protection organization, after they hear what I have to say, will probably think, let's stone this guy. But I actually think we all intrinsically believe that human life has more intrinsic worth than the life of a pig or a cow or a fish. Yeah, we do. So if we eat to survive, or we eat because we particularly like the taste of chicken, we understand that, yes, that chicken, is a part of the natural order, but at the same time, we also know that that chicken doesn't necessarily have a sort of intrinsic worth. That's the reason why there was uproar when those girls were kidnapped. Remember? And then you had Michelle Obama said, "Bring back our girls."
What, was that in Nigeria?
Nigeria.
Yeah. Was it Boko Haram?
Yeah, it was Boko Haram. Yeah.
Yeah. So remember, there was this whole uproar. Why? Because we know that those girls, their lives are sacred and they have intrinsic worth. And that's different to a chicken. Now, obviously, we are I believe we're here to be stewards. A part of the role of why we're here on this planet is to be stewards, so to look after the planet. But at the same time, if you know that your motives for killing that chicken isn't just because you out of bloodlust, you just want to see chickens die, you know that actually, it's for my survival. It's for my family to eat. It's that kind of thing.
Well, to play devil's advocate on this one, maybe particularly, and meat is a good example, because we're arguably on a precipice where from here on to the next 50 years, the worldview.
It's changing now, man.
It's changing. And I think meat eating and climate change are interlinked, because arable farming is one of the biggest contributors to greenhouse gases, right? So there's an interlink there. And it's not unreasonable to see a future 100 years from now where people will go through like the old records of ancient Instagram and look at all the meat being carved up on social media and label all those people as butchers and monsters,
barbaric.
And all these barbaric people. But I guess looking at it today, whereas eating a chicken might not be morally dubious to you, right? There's a process in that, and the process of, because chickens are not natural, if you know what I mean. Like, a chicken doesn't exist in the wild. That creature was taken and
but it's still a living thing.
Bred. But what I'm saying is, like, there's a process. It's the same with cow's milk, which is that the cow gives birth to a calf, and then the calf is kept next to the.
I thought they gave birth to humans, man.
Occasionally, from time to time. But the cow gives birth, and the calf is kept next to the cow so that the mother cow still believes it's rearing its young, and so that the milk can be continually pumped, and the mother never gets to be with its child. It never gets to have that mammalian.
Yeah, it's stuff
bond.
like
yeah,
that.
But Tunde, shouldn't okay? That maybe the question then, or the solution to that, is not okay. We should stop eating meat, but it's just ethics around farming.
Yeah, of course. So what I'm saying here is,
argument,
whereas your act of buying a chicken and eating the chicken is not morally questionable to you, right? But if it's based off a process that has fundamental, ethical, moral issues, how does that affect your own morality?
That's a good point. I mean, and to be fair, considering that, I do believe we're here to be stewards, in a sense, to look after what we have. That is a very good point. And maybe, maybe that's something that we need to think about, and think about, okay, do we need to think about how, what we're contributing to unknowingly, inadvertently, let's say. But what that also shows me, though, is that even though on the one hand, morality seems to be this amorphous, intangible thing, there are moments when it feels very tangible. If a kid gets kidnapped, like we were mentioning, those girls, or someone gets murdered, or someone is raped, or we see an act of pedophilia, we are in uproar. There is something deep within us, something visceral that actually tells us that this is not right.
It's empathy, ultimately. I think that's where it comes from. Granted, not everyone. Don't you think? Well, you don't think so? Like, because you would think, how would that make me feel? And I think that's where the anger stems. I could be wrong here, because if you hear about these girls getting kidnapped and stuff, you'd be like, how would I feel if that was my sister, or if this was my whoever, someone I knew? I don't know. That's the way I interpret.
But do we necessarily need to go through that thought process to know that something is wrong?
No, that's what I'm trying to say.
But how else would you perceive it as immoral then?
But what I'm saying is, Hamza, it's not just empathy. What happened in the Holocaust, that's a tragedy. We don't have to go through that process of how do I feel about this? Maybe if I was in their shoes, how would I feel about this?
No,
you can see it is clearly wrong.
Is it because essentially, going back to human life being considered sacred, is it ultimately that? Could that be why? I think
that's definitely a strong part of it. It's definitely.
I mean, Harari,
not the part of it.
Harari would disagree, though. That guy, what's his name? Yuval Harari. With Sapiens, he would say actually it's all a construct. Human rights, it's all a construct. I actually think Harari's talking a load of nonsense. So here's the thing.
Calling him out, yeah.
I think he's
sending shots.
I'll have him on the podcast next week.
Here's the thing. Obviously, he's a smarter man than I. Guy's a professor, PhD. But I don't believe it, man. I don't buy it.
I agree.
I don't buy it. When something truly terrible, something truly evil happens,
you feel it.
There is something visceral.
Yeah. I think with don't get me wrong, I like his books, I like his writing, and I like his thought process, but I do think he fails to grasp what you're getting at there. That almost intangible connection or an intangible bond between humans. And maybe it is because we all believe a social construct that humans are special, or humans or our lives have a little bit more value because we have a choice, if you know what I mean. So if anything, it's that. If anything that's special about us, it's arguably that.
But I don't know, man.
I think he does miss that, like that.
Yeah, I think he misses that, and I think he undermines a lot of things. Obviously, one thing I would say, he does seem to sort of like he doesn't judge various meta-narratives too harshly, like the Christian meta-narrative, let's say, or the Judeo-Christian meta-narrative. He doesn't necessarily judge it too harshly, because I think for him, he comes at it from the point of utility. It has utilitarian value. Okay,
Yeah.
it works. It's valuable in society. That construct works, but I don't believe personally that it's a construct. And the reason why I don't believe that is I actually, I do believe that there has to be a God. I believe that, man. I think there has to be a God. Now, some people are going to be like, "Hey, get him off of me!" I believe that there has to be a God, man. And there are a few perspectives that you can take on this, because okay, this is the way I like to think about it. So there's a couple arguments that I kind of wanted to put to you guys, and to what you think about it. So there's one argument, called the Kalam cosmological argument. Kalam is a Arabic word, basically means like utterance or speech or something. And basically the argument kind of goes like this: whatever begins to exist had a cause. The universe begins to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. Okay, so that's basically the argument in a kind of a nutshell. And I heard about this argument from a guy called William Lane Craig. He's a sort of like a Christian apologist, and he's a philosopher in his own right. Written many books on various sort of strands of philosophy. So that's the Kalam cosmological argument. Okay, so for me, I do agree that if the universe is a created thing, if the universe began, that means it had a cause. And if it had a cause, it has to point you somewhere. It has to point you to something. So the next kind of argument I want us to kind of think about is the sort of ontological argument, where basically like ontology is basically the study of being, right? So essentially the ontological argument goes something like this, okay? If it's even possible for a maximally great being to exist, it is, and think about the wording, if it's even possible. So here it's more about a probability. If it's even possible that a maximally great being exists, by that very utterance, it's then also possible that that maximally great being exists in some possible world. Okay? And in philosophy, when they talk about possible worlds, they're talking about like an imagined, it's like a mind exercise, an imagined world that could be slightly different to this one. And one of the ways I like to think about it is I like to use examples from the world that we live in, the actual world, that help me to understand how I could possibly conceive of a possible world. So for example, I remember there was this case quite a few years ago. I think I was watching the National Geographic, and they were talking about these basically like the certain species of piranha in South America. I can't remember where it was exactly, but there was this sort of government scheme to relocate the species of piranha. I think they were called the pacu. So what it is, these species of piranha, the pacu, they're actually herbivores. So they basically just eat vegetation. So what they did, they actually moved these fish.
So you mean Piranha 3D was a lie?
Hey, man.
Those piranha are waste, man. And them sharp teeth, yeah? No.
So
what vegetables grow in the swamps though? What vegetables are they eating?
Hey,
algae, man, maybe.
Yeah, man, algae and all that stuff, man.
Carrots.
So anyway, basically they relocated these pacu, and where they relocated them, basically it didn't have any vegetation there. What they found is that over time, these pacu started eating meat. So what it showed us is that it's this adaptation in real life. Like we are actually seeing these pacu adapt to become omnivore. Here's the thing.
Yeah.
But why? So that helps us to understand what we mean by possible worlds. So you just magnify that, because if an adaptation can happen like that, then think about what could have happened. Maybe there's a world where they were already pacu that are omnivore. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway, the point is that's the second premise. So the first premise is obviously, if it is even possible that a maximally great being exists, the second premise, it's also possible that a maximally great being exists in some possible world. If it can exist in some possible world, it can exist in every possible world. And the reason why is because it's maximally great. If it's less than maximally great, it wouldn't appear in every world.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So then there's that. Then after that, yeah, if it's possible that it can exist in if it's possible that maximally great being can exist in every possible world, it can exist in the actual world, which means that it exists. So the way I see it is, that for me is quite a persuasive argument about the probability of God, because it now it rests now in the lap of someone who doesn't believe in a higher power necessarily.
Yeah.
To say,
I'm going to say
to basically give proof beyond the shadow of a doubt that there is no maximally great being.
Yeah. So I agree with that, especially because, you know, in contrast to that, what somebody will try and say, no, I disagree with you, but then they would happily believe the simulation theory, which runs on the same methodology ultimately, which is that if in the future it is possible to create a completely realistic simulation of the current day, then there is a possibility that we could all be in a simulation. The underlying concept of that is the same. So I agree, because I think some people would, the minute you mention God or a being of a higher order, people, I think, you know, it's in vogue to kind of just dismiss you or dismiss your point of view without really understanding that actually the probability is there.
Yeah. And here's the thing, to kind of bring it back to the whole question of morality, if we grant that this maximally great being exists, this maximally great being would have certain characteristics. So, for example, it would be omnipotent, all powerful, because it's maximally great. It would be all-knowing, omniscient. It would be all-loving, omnibenevolent. And it would also have perfect morality. And I personally believe, instead of us scrambling around trying to figure out what's right and what's wrong amongst ourselves, which are fallible, and we have our foibles and we're dealing with our vices, we refer to objective morality from that maximally great being in order to sort of orchestrate and direct our moral choices.
But then here we come back to the issue, which always seems to be the problem with everything, human beings. Because that ideal morality is always interpreted through the lens of humans. And if we look at the history of life, you know, we can clearly see where people have misinterpreted it or perverted perverted guidance, or perverted anything in order to satisfy either short-term needs or, you know, the needs of their own clan and kin or whatever else it might be. You know, humans are fallible. So anything that has to therefore pass through a human, you can argue is at risk of being made fallible.
I do agree.
So it leaves us back in this thing where we all feel there is a core morality, there is a core underlying human nature. But when it comes to communicating that out to people and packaging it wholesale, we just don't do a good enough job.
And I think, to bring us full circle, the reason we don't do a good job of it is because those people that are adherents of a certain worldview, are not, sometimes fail in the performance of that worldview. They fail in the living it out. And which brings us back to us, why we should not idolize celebrity or people in prominent position. And I'll give you a couple examples. First example, MLK. Now, in a couple of years' time, I believe it's the FBI, they're going to be releasing these tapes, of
mixtapes,
Yeah, man. So obviously they're planning to they're planning the EP first, and obviously then
then the album's gonna drop.
Then
the hologram, the concert with this hologram rapping with Tupac.
But yeah, so like basically they're gonna be releasing these tapes where it's alleged that it gives proof of the fact that Martin Luther King Jr. was present when someone was being raped, and that he essentially didn't protest against it. Now, this is alleged. Now, I don't know. I don't know. We can only really make our judgments, like, well, you know, until that comes out. But here's the thing: MLK, you know, one of the leaders of the civil rights movement, an upstanding, you know, citizen, you know, a doctor, was given, you know, was it Person of the Year for Time magazine, was given a Nobel Peace Prize. That same guy was a womanizer.
Mike, I'm so happy you brought this up, because this was what we were going to talk about as well, with whether or not, if someone like MLK, someone that has, you know, helped with the civil rights movement, arguably one of the most important things that was like done in the 20th century, people like musicians or actors that have brought a lot of joy, or authors that have brought a lot of joy to people's lives, if they're found to have done something terrible, does that completely negate everything they've created? Does that does that mean you're throwing away the DVDs and the CDs and stuff like that? But that's you know, that's the point essentially you're trying to make. Same thing with Gandhi, right? I found out in the last couple of years that Gandhi was actually a crazy racist. This guy actually believed that black people were below humans.
But like, then why did he meet up? But then why did he meet up with MLK? Unless his feelings
politics.
On unless his feelings on that evolved.
Changed. No, this is true. Granted, you have a point. Some of these memoirs I actually read were on when he was younger. So to be fair, just like with Malcolm X, some of his opinions changed as he got older. This is a fair point. But there was a stage where this guy was actually some radical racist. And it was one of those things where it was kind of sad, because he's trying to fight for his people and for their independence. And it's like, dude, can't you see how other people are struggling with the same things? Like it's kind of a weird thing. But does that completely take away what he's done? No.
Does that take away from his legacy?
Yeah, exactly.
No.
I genuinely don't think so. Yeah, sorry, Sina, what were you going to say, man?
I was just going to just drop a little bit of a thing in there, which is like, you know, I think sometimes morality is in the eye of the colonizer.
Yeah.
You know, I think that might be an element of neo-colonialism, where they're taking on a mindset of the people that have basically
this is possible.
dominated.
Yeah,
which is possible. But
well,
then
you
they're
can
also
then say
probably...
is he then a man of his time? And then you can argue then, you know, with all these statues being torn down, can you then argue they were also men of their times?
Well, like, you can, and you should, because they were men of their time, and to judge them out of context is not. It's smart.
But should they be exempt completely from what they've done because they were just?
Personally, because I think, as you probably heard me rattle on about before, the issue is our perception of these people. It's our perception of them as being perfect, whether it's Mandela or MLK or Gandhi. You know,
man. Well, Mandela went to jail for a reason, man. This guy was, you know what I mean? Actually, a bad boy in that. Yeah, but sorry.
Yeah, exactly. But it's true. We essentially deify these characters, and in doing that, we remove all negatives, even though there are negatives there, and we sweep that under the rug. And I'm just a massive advocate for teaching unadulterated history, like just all the warts and all, everything. Once all that is out there, and we, you know, unfortunately, for mostly political reasons, certain things, the narrative has changed. You know, to push a particular agenda, the narrative gets changed. You know, the certain details get omitted, and I think we do everybody a disservice because we create oversimplified realities.
The only thing is, though,
reality is just more complex.
Only thing is though, Tunde, like we are not all automatons. We're not like Data from Star Trek. You know what I mean?
And even he had feelings, man. That guy had emotions as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, but when you got emotions, it always mess it up, man.
No, but but with that being said, because we are emotional creatures, many like poems and poets talk about the soul, and it's meant to be like the seat of the emotions type of thing. And that's it. We're emotional creatures. So here's the thing. You'll find that when we have funerals, the funerals aren't for the dead. The funerals are for us.
Yeah. The dead doesn't care. They're gone.
Because they're gone.
Yeah.
The funerals are for us so that we can actually deal with the pain of their absence.
Yeah. This is true.
So
that's
the
actually
point
a good way
is,
to put it.
when you tear down statues, I don't personally agree with it, but when you tear down statues, I can understand that to some people, that might be a form of reparation.
Yeah.
A form of vindication, even if it is only symbolic. I don't have anything against it necessarily, because I don't really care either way. But at the same time, I'd rather be able to see the bust of someone that I knew had a sort of murky and dubious past, and make my own conclusions about where he stands in history.
But you can only really make that conclusion if all the information about him is openly discussed.
Yeah, and then you can figure out how you want to I don't know, deal with him or judge him going forward. It's like is it Casablanca? You know, HBO now, they're starting to put that kind of disclaimer in front. I think it's Casablanca, I could be wrong, but they're trying to say, look, it's a film that was made at a particular time, so black people are depicted in a certain way, and so on and so forth.
Gone with the Wind as well.
Yeah, I think it's one of those.
Gone with, yeah.
And there's the same thing with these statues. I think, granted, because to some extent, I think symbols are powerful, to be fair. I genuinely do. I think if these statues were put in a museum and there was some sort of context so people can learn, I don't think you should sweep history under the carpet. I genuinely don't think so. People need to learn about how terrible, how bad things can get and how to avoid them. I know it sounds cliche, but it's kind of true. But to sweep things completely under the carpet, I just think it's and this weird editing of history as well, man. It's kind of weird. Sometimes you have to look back and say, hey, we've actually come a long way as a collective.
I mean, if you look at history books, you would assume that everybody in the past were upright, upstanding, completely pious, completely moral individuals who did no wrong and fought justified wars.
Yeah. No.
What about the British, not the East India Company, and intentionally getting Hong Kong hooked on opium? Getting the Chinese hooked on opium so that they can
for the trade
secure. Yeah. So where they lost money on the slave trade because they banned it, they switched to providing opium to the Chinese. Like it's
wow, man.
Immoral, right?
Actually, scumbag.
No, it's immoral, right? But without that, you don't have the British Empire as we understand it. Without that trade, without that you don't have the British naval superiority. Yeah. You then don't have World War I, and then you don't have World War II, and you don't have our current geopolitical situation. There's a lot in there, and obviously the morality changes. But we've got to understand, if we're looking at something like that, we can't just jump out of our seats and say, the British, they're
No, I do agree with what you're saying to some extent, but at the same time, I think sometimes when people say they are the result of their times. Okay, I'll give you an example, right? During the slave trade, a lot of these so-called scientists justified the behavior by saying blacks aren't even human. There's some subspecies of ape or some shit like this to justify the behavior or the cruelty, right?
Yeah.
So then to deceive, for that deception, it's a bad thing you're doing. So it's one of those things where you can go, okay, it's the time, but you're going out of your way to be cruel. Granted what time it is. So surely these people, no matter what era it is, you still have to take this into account, man. Am I wrong?
You're not wrong, because I think that touches on the one of the dangers of relying on science, right? One of the dangers of relying on science, or the way people now essentially believe in science and don't really understand that science is just a process. It's a process of reviewing things and understanding. And science is open to a massive amount of bias, either by the person funding the research, the person undertaking the research, or the people being researched. You know, I guess to put it this way, if all your life, the only book you ever read told you that the sky was green, and then the first day you actually stepped out of that cave that you're apparently in, and you saw the sky and it was blue, you know, you're going to have a massive, massive shock. But can anyone blame you for your limited perspective if that's all you've ever known? You know, can we look at that and say, yeah, okay, that's not correct, or that wasn't right? It's not right by our standards, but we have to, I think, be emotionally a bit more mature to, you know, to judge people in their own context. Some people in history were bad people, even in their time.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, to use your example with those scientists, at the same time as that, there were scientists who were also saying, hold on, guys, you guys are completely making this study up and we can't find any evidence to support your case. If you're a scientist who will then look at that information and disregard it and say, nah, what are you talking about? You know, black people are just subhuman. Then even contextually, you would be a bad person.
Yeah. That's my point.
From,
that's
right?
The point I'm trying to make. Yeah, it's one of those things where ultimately, I think what I'm trying to say is, if you know what is wrong or right, granted it can change and stuff like this, but I do think to some extent there are some things that just hold to be right and some things that are just wrong.
But this is
that. Yeah. So what are you gonna say, Mike?
No, all I'm saying is, but this is why I believe that for me comes from, you know, to use a phrase from, I believe, Zacharias, it comes from a moral arbiter. I truly believe that is a sense of objective morality. Now, here's the thing: based upon the situation and context, there will be certain things that you perceive in a particular way, and as a result of that, you will have to try to make a decision within that moment, because there are some situations that might be very different to a situation that someone had faced 20 years ago, based upon the fact that the technology we have, based upon, you know, new temptations, you know, based upon education, based upon all these kind of factors. So I don't know. I personally think that we should have a deep desire to be moral, and to always strive to be moral, like to be truthful, to be better. Now, obviously, my better today may be grounds for someone judging me today.
No doubt.
But if I am coming from a genuine place of seeking after truth, seeking after direction genuinely for my life and also for the people around me, my family and so on, I believe that you will that you will get there. Obviously, I believe that where you would find that sense of direction is from a higher power, you know, maximally great being. But I do believe that we get there through a genuine sense of searching to be better, as opposed to sort of just going with the flow, but actually really thinking about the decisions you make, the words you say, and the things you do. I think if we can think about the way we act, the way we talk, and the way we think, and actually all those grounds, with I believe the added help, in my personal opinion, I'm not projecting on anyone else, with the added help of I believe something divine, then that will lead us to a place of morality, a true morality.
No,
you know what would be one cool way to show this? It would be like the most it would be the most immoral experiment ever. But you get a couple of like kids, you just leave them on an abandoned island with loads of cameras, and just watch to see how they'll interact and what culture and what
what the moral
what version, what they would develop on
codes
their
would
own,
be.
you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, even not that. Like, if you know, one of the joys of just meeting people and socializing and stuff like that is, I think there is a thing, I don't know, like I do think there is a human thing in most situations and most people, like a weird kind of human glue, gel, or whatever you want to call it, which is, you know, where you might travel to places and meet people completely foreign to you, whose cultures are completely different to yours. And you might find that you get along fine, even though you don't understand each other, right? You get along fine, even though you don't understand each other. But there are certain things that are almost universally considered bad, right? There are things that are just across disparate cultures, across cultures that are isolated. There are things that are just genuinely considered bad and that we shouldn't do to each other. And, you know, to Mike's point, that innate morality seems to be there, but then so it's all depending on me, but basically through, I genuinely think that the lens of our lives, the fears, the things we maybe internalize or project onto other people warp that innate morality. So maybe our experience of loss might spur us to take something from someone else and, you know, do something negative to someone else.
I agree.
You know, yeah, that's all I got to say on
that. Well, yeah, thanks, guys. To be fair, we actually went over longer than I thought we would today, man. Honestly, I think this is a topic we could actually probably talk, obviously, hours about, to be fair. But yeah, thank you again. We'll do this another time. If you guys have any suggestions for any topics, please let me know, though. And
yeah, no worries,
yeah, man. Mike, thanks. Yeah, exactly. It's been good. Thanks, man.
Yeah, man.
I really appreciate it, man. And thanks, Tane, man. I'll let you guys go.
Man.
Yeah, man. What I would say is, obviously, just to finish off, hit that like and subscribe.
Smash that like button.
Yeah. Very good. But yeah, the new artwork, I'll work on that, man. 100%. But yeah, let's keep this going, man. Yeah, I'll leave it to it.
Cool, man. It's great talking to you guys, man.